So why don't we start off with you just telling me the basics about what human design is.
Human design is a typology system. So people know Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, astrology, any of these systems that help us understand, even though we're all similar in so many ways, there's also this differentiation across humanity, and we're all unique. And it can be helpful to really understand our uniqueness to operate more efficiently in life. And human design is a revealed knowledge. So it was, divinely downloaded by a dude, very unexpected, a guy who was not expecting this, not involved in any of this information or knowledge, and had a mystical experience in the mid to late 80s. And it's a synthesis of a number of systems: astrology, the chakras, the 64 archetypes from the I Ching, which correlate to our genetics. There's an aspect from the tree of life from the Kabbalah. And even though it's all very esoteric, it's actually incredibly logical and practical, and shows us in great detail and accuracy our unique genetic imprinting for this lifetime, both of our personality as well as our unconscious and our body.
So this guy in the 80s, right? So just normal guy got some cognition of how all of these things would fit together. How did that come about? Was it, actually, I think I read it was basically a voice was speaking to him. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely not a normal guy. Not like a guy in an office all of a sudden had a voice. So he was and by the way, I'm probably not the best spokesperson for his story, but I know I can tell you some of the basics. But he was a French Canadian dude who was very eccentric. From a human design standpoint, it's very clear he's highly individualistic and self-empowered. But he left his job and his family, disappeared, ended up in Ibiza, Spain. I think he did a lot of drugs, and basically he was sort of, without knowing it, sort of preparing himself to have that experience. And I think he was homeless in Ibiza, living out in the wilderness when it happened, or living in like an abandoned building.
And what kind of drugs was he doing?
I don't know all the drugs, but I think like ketamine, and I think he probably did all the drugs like in his lifetime. Even prior to leaving his family, I think he was always involved in the drug culture and always interested in what's new and interesting. And he was clearly somebody who was interested in understanding life and its deep and the mysteries of life. But he had never been, as the way he tells it, he had never been attracted to anything esoteric prior to that. Like, he was interested through his personal experience and then through science, but not through mysticism. Or
most of these schools are at least hundreds of years old, if not thousands of years old, the divination schools. And so also interesting. I could see how I can definitely relate to do a bunch of drugs, and you kind of the way I think about it is you thin the veil a little bit between kind of the material conscious reality and something beyond that. So sounds like it opened him up.
Yeah. I've personally not done a lot of drugs in my life, but I did have a therapeutic psilocybin experience a year ago, and that was phenomenally helpful. Healing.
Yeah, it's very esoteric, right? And like a voice from beyond. And so it sounds like what the voice, or how he cognized it, was that so the planets, the stars, and these other models, the chakra system, that they all were interplayed, and they could tell a story about the individual based on their time of birth. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So what he was told is that um, that each one of us, when we incarnate, we receive two sets of imprinting. The imprinting essentially gives us our genetic, you know, who we are genetically for this lifetime, and it's a reflection of essentially the universe in these two key moments: the moment of birth, but also 88 days prior to birth. We actually, that's one of the things that distinguishes human design from astrology, is we're looking at two separate imprintings, and then how they come together as a quantum. And so, and it all correlates with again our with our genetics, and with um, each of the archetypes. There's 64 archetypes. Each one has 6 lines, and that correlates with like the codons of our genes. And according to the voice, the way this imprinting happens is through the neutrinos, which physicists know about and study, that come. It's basically information from the stars, most of the neutrinos that impact us are from our sun. But essentially, that's like the consciousness program of the universe. So these forms that we've incarnated into have been evolving, and they're becoming more and more sophisticated vehicles for self-reflected consciousness, the universe being conscious of itself. And humanity, each one of us is like a cell inside of a larger organism. So like humanity is, as a totality, right? Each one of us plays a role. And we each have a unique role, and we also are uniquely filtering, right? We're uniquely filtering the consciousness field. And so we are aware and awake beings. But we can have a conversation and relate to each other, but your experience of life can never be my experience of life, and vice versa, right? And so at this point in the evolutionary process, this is as sophisticated as it gets, it's phenomenal. And it's also very limited. It's deeply limited. I mean, the practical, and I'm highly practical. I'm actually learning about the origins of human design was an immediate turnoff for me. I wasn't really interested in anything that that science couldn't explain, essentially. But when I had the reading, my wife was like, let's get these readings. Like, fine, got the reading, blew me away, absolutely nailed me and my wife. It explained some like aspects of our experience of life that just constantly causing difficulty for us in relationship to ourselves, in relationship to each other, in relationship to work and making money, in relationship to our health. Our son, so accurate, like nothing I'd ever experienced before. So, I went there because I was saying, like, you have we each have our own experience, because we're in these boxes that are filtering in a unique way. And that's part of why life is hard, because so much of life as a human being is about relationships, and relationships are inherently challenging because we don't actually have a shared consciousness.
Yeah, I run into that a lot with doing the work of Byron Katie, which is stories. So we each have different stories about reality, or even basic concepts like, what does respect look like? Two people have completely different versions of what it looks like to be respectful, or kind, or supportive.
I was just gonna say, even below the level of story, even if we could truly accurately experience and express our truth, or the truth, it's still a subjective truth.
In the Enneagram, it's like, as far as I understand, it's like Enneagram is basically kind of starts with the ego construct. So when you're born, at some point, if you don't come into the world with it, then at some point there's some fundamental foundational experiences, formative experiences that take place. And then you have an interpretation of that experience, and that goes on to create your own ego construct. But it sounds like with human design that this is even before that. So it's not that you're a blank slate, that you actually, that it originates a little even earlier than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something I kick myself for not understanding, because I think it's really actually obvious. And I think most any parent can get that like these are not blank slates. Like the children that we're raising are really not blank slates. They come out pre-imprinted and formed, and there's going to be, but we're also incredibly susceptible to conditioning. So it's not like, well, this is how I am, and it's static. Yeah, your design it really illustrates this so clearly. So you'll see two sets of numbers. So the red is from 88 days before you were born. That's your unconscious, your body. The black is from the moment you were born. That's your conscious and your personality. And then those numbers show up in this body graph. So there's 9 chakras. And in those 9 chakras, chakras are energy centers. And there's energy pathways between those centers. Based on when you're born, those numbers light up. And you just happen to be someone who has 2 centers out of 9 defined. So my oldest son, has 9 open centers. So he's completely open and white, his body graph. And then there's people who have all 9 centers activated. So it's very different to be, like, for instance, to have the 59th gate activated, which you do here. If it's in a defined center, meaning turned on, active, it's consistent, the energy is always flowing there. So even when you were born, the moment you were born, you come out, the energy is flowing between these 2 centers through this channel. But everything else is open. So you're a being who is defined. What's consistent for you is right down here. Everything else is open and inconsistent. These are receptors. This is where energy from outside of you flows into you. And it creates vulnerability. I mean, it really is a vulnerability to be so open, but there's also incredible potential to enjoy life through the openness, and then also to help others. It's your sources of wisdom. It's like their sources of totally getting all distracted by other energies that aren't you, other people's ideas, other people's directions, other people's ways of being and operating. So it can really, it's usually where people are having the most challenges, through their openness and the conditioning that's happening there, that's happened and happening there. And those are that's like Velcro for limiting beliefs. That's where a lot of the mind just really goes to town in response to the energy that gets pulled into these open centers, and then it amplifies. But so does that make sense as far as openness versus, so it's nature versus where you're conditioned, nature versus nurture. Your nature, what's consistent and reliable, is right here. And then your nurture is here. So you grew up, you have parents, I don't know if you have siblings, but if you grew up in a household with other human beings, almost certainly they were defining some of these centers, and you were constantly being conditioned by them in those centers. See, nobody can condition you here, because that's who you are, and the energy is always flowing there. So I can just tell you right now, having taken a brief look at your design, this is somebody whose life is going to be centered around work. Like, work is going to be a big, and then relationships, intimate relationships, and difficulties with intimate relationships. And then feeling confused about where you're headed, like, where are you headed in life? Who should you love? Who should you commit to? What work should you do? A lot of that. But that can sound really easy, because those are big themes for all of us, right? But like times 100 for you, intimate relationships, somebody who's going to be a worker, and then personal confusion and potential struggle or suffering around who you are and where you're headed, but then this capacity to really help others, because like this wide open center here, your 14th gate is pointing at the 2nd gate, which is the gate of direction, the gate of direction of self. So you have no idea where you're headed, but you have amazing capacity to help other people with where they're headed.
Uh-huh. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, so I have so many questions. So and this is very cool. I love this concept of the nature and nurture. So you come in with some pre-existing software, are already installed software, and that's pretty those are like your sacred cows. Those are things that are just you hold as true for you.
It's literally the machinery. It's a hard drive and a software. So there's like hardware and the software as well. It's like the hardware is the body that you're born into. The software is like the soul that enters and its particular imprinting, how it's going to be filtering consciousness. And that's what you have to work with. You get a few software updates and you're always being influenced by people around you, as well as the transits, like wherever the planets are, and some people more than others. But there's always this weather that we're in. You know, all of humanity is being conditioned by the neutrino ocean, so to speak, and the currents and what's currently activated in the environment.
Very cool. Okay, so yeah, so this is me, this is the system, this is the software and the hardware, and then the next dimension is how the planets or the cosmos, how they're circling and the influences as they transit, as the planets move, that those planets exert influences on this particular system here.
Yeah,
that I am.
But the big one, probably even more so than that, is for a child. You know, if you're talking about that child who's born with that, is then the conditioning of their family, of their extended family, of their community, of their, you know, all these conditioning fields. We live in this like dense conditioning fields, and one of those conditioning fields is the transits. But it's you know, it's so impactful who we're around and what their energies are doing in our bodies.
Cool. So yeah, that gives you some super basic questions to help kind of orient me. Or so you've got the closed and the open parts here. So the hardware and the software, and then you have the experiences, those fields around you, the influences of your family and your life, and then you have the planetary influences as well. What is kind of the weight for each one as far as influence?
Okay, so if you look at the top two, that's Sun and Earth. You've got a conscious and unconscious Sun and Earth. That's about 70% of your DNA is caught up in those four archetypes. And then I couldn't tell you weights beyond that, but that's what we call your incarnation cross in human design, and the combination of those four archetypes kind of gives you a life purpose that can potentially be fulfilled if one is living correctly as themselves. And that's probably, since this is a basic introduction to human design, I think it's really important to say that. And you can see there's a lot of information here, and this is only the surface. There's actually, if you use a different program, you can see deeper levels of somebody's design. But the fundamental, most heretical and important and practical teaching of human design is that the mind cannot make decisions for one's life, should not make decisions for one's life. That that there's this binary, right? Body and mind, and that everything that we've been taught, that we need to make good decisions, that we need to, you know, weigh the pros and cons, be smart about it, figure it out, is all just, it's not based in reality. That the mechanics of life, the mechanics of the Maya that we operate in, you know, the program, the matrix that we operate in, we're no different than a species that migrates. You know, how do monarch butterflies know how to get from Mexico to Canada on their migratory path? They don't have a human brain to screw it up. There's something in them that's hooked into the larger pattern of life. What human design says is that same thing for human beings, and it's just like any animal or insect. It's our body. And so we have an inner authority, and it's the only thing that can be trusted to make correct decisions, to that basically, it's not that life is predetermined, but there is a geometry. You know, you and I ending up on this call, it's not, you know, sure, we had choice in the matter, but did we really? You know, it's just, here we are. And the mind, if the mind gets involved, it can alter our direction in life, and really get us into commitments, get us into investments, get us into all kinds of things that were never correct for us, and almost always lead to life is suffering, right? But almost always lead to amplifying suffering, you know, more suffering than we need to be experiencing.
Right. In our modern culture, the ethos is we're rational. The go-to is to make decisions based on rationality. And you're saying that isn't actually the best way to go about it, that doing that can actually lead you in the wrong direction. And this is talking about a new, it's like we're looking at the wrong compass, and this is showing us that there's a different compass that is not deterministic, but rather is it actually more in the flow of your own true self, for lack of another
and
term.
Its place and connection to the larger pattern of life. So like that, that life isn't supposed to be, it's not supposed to be a struggle, you know? So that the rational strategic decision making, according to human design, you know, take it or leave it, but is obviously an incredibly important evolutionary talent that we developed, capacity that we developed, that got us to the top of the food chain, got us to 8 billion plus people on the planet. But to operate from that way, it only leads to a homogenized life, which isn't a bad life. It's not morally good or bad. It's just a life that's based in fear and comparison, and it's all supportive of like the evolution is the it's not like there's a God. I mean, maybe there is, but there's not like there's a God who has a plan, or that you know, there's some kind of conspiracy, but like you can tell that the species, what it cares about is that the genes get passed forward. Like all it cares about is that you have kids and that your kids survive and go and mate with the right mate, so that the species can continue to evolve and thrive. And we get used in the process. So when people are like making decisions about getting married, having kids, what career I'm going to choose, and there's all this influence, from the media and from their family, and it's all these voices in their head, and it's all about what should I do, and it's often about pleasing other people, about staying safe, about what's going to give me the best material advantage, et cetera, et cetera. For some people, there might be this, two people can make the same decision. One, it's a complete correct decision for them and an expression of who they are. Another person, it's just a conditioned mental decision that is completely disconnected with what's true for them. And it's going to lead them down a really difficult path.
Yeah.
Where it may not even be a bad path, and it may actually still be full of good things, but it's not their path. And what we're all dealing with is living with some version of, you know, this sense of being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right. We kind of live in this individualistic paradigm. We definitely live in a very individualistic society and world, I would judge. And a lot of coaching and typologies and, you know, astrological readings are very focused on the individualism, and to further, and I'm judging here, my read is that it's focusing on, you know, what's my life, what's my path, and it's all, you know, it's It's not wrong. I don't think it's conflicted with what you're talking about, but what I really hear in this is actually that we're expanding the scope of what we're willing to take into account. So yes, it's individual, but there's also, you, I think, use the word flow with something greater, something universal. So I'll riff just one more thing on that and then get your take on it. The word integrity, that means I'm true to myself, right? But then there's a greater integrity, and it's a word that was coined by a different individual. He called it contegrity, which is integrity that is in continuity with the environment.
Yeah, and human design shows that it really goes well with integral theory, which I'm not an expert in, but just understanding a system that continues to include, all of everything that came before it, and tries to include everything, the whole human experience in the evolutionary process. So you can see in this body graph these channels, and each of these channels are part of larger circuits. And so there's individual circuitry. Like I was mentioning that Ra, the dude who heard the voice, all his circuitry was individual. So he was, even when he was born as a kid, he was probably, especially growing up in the 40s, 50s, probably in a more conservative, community-based situation, like a stronger kind of tribal environment, with like everybody goes to this school and everybody does this religion. We've been liberating ourselves from that. But anyway, he probably from a very early age was accused of being selfish, self-absorbed, only caring about himself, being someone who. So anyway, point is that you can see it, that in someone's chart we carry it. There's the survival circuitry, which is just the man walking in the, our ancestor way back, just walking in the bush, needing to be present in the moment, surviving. And then there's individual circuitry, and then there's tribal circuitry, and then there's collective circuitry. So there are people who are just, and it's so obvious, we see the schisms in our society where there's people who are so collective and they're so oriented. I'm a collective person. We're oriented towards all of humanity, right? And what should everybody do? Like everybody should take the vaccine, right? Or everybody should do this or whatever. And then the tribe is like, well, we'll do it if it's good for us, but we'll take the vaccine. We don't care if the other tribe doesn't get it, as long as we get it. And then the individual's like, you're not going to tell me what to do. I'll either take the vaccine because I want to or not, but the tribe's not going to tell me what to do and the collective's not going to tell me what to do. And some people have like these mixes where there's these contradictions inside of them where they could be very tribal, but also very individual. And that seeing that can be so helpful to resolve the tensions between that, which really never get resolved. It's just that we can relax around it. They're like women who are deeply individual in their human design, and then they're married to a husband who expects them to be this tribal feminine archetype of the mother caregiver, and like she's designed to just be a self-empowered badass, right? Like, and so just seeing all of that, it's like, all right, we can relax. We don't have to expect ourselves to be different or change, because it's not going to happen anyway.
Right. Awesome. So yes, one of the practical applications is expanding the scope a little bit to see yourself in a bigger flow. And then the self-awareness piece, which is, I get that from other typologies as well. It's just, what is it? When I can see myself and see my tendencies, then things become a little easier. I can have a little bit more equanimity around them. And what are some other practical applications? Or said another way, how do you help people when they come to you for a reading?
Yeah. It always starts with what we just covered, which is self-awareness and self-acceptance. And then that can be carried out into the relationships. So whatever someone's core relationships are, where they're having challenges, human design, you can map two people on top of each other and see where the energies meet. And there's different ways that the energies interplay. It's going to explain why people come together, why people feel frustrated. Like, why do I feel frustrated with this person, but everybody loves them? You know, all of these kinds of things show up in the map. It's the same result, which is awareness allows for acceptance, which allows for us to get out of our heads and just into our experience as ourselves, letting other people be themselves, and just consistently reducing friction in our own movement, but then in between human beings. And then you can apply it to any group of people. There's this is pretty much like science fiction. I mean, all of it is, but it starts to get weirder and weirder. However, I only talk about it with you and continue to share it with people because I've verified it in my own experience over and over again and find it to be true and helpful in that experience. When you get a group of people together, especially in person, a whole other field forms, a trans-auric field forms. So when a baby is born, you've got mama, papa, and baby. It's a whole different ballgame energetically than just the mama and papa before the baby came. And then that field actually uses the individuals to work together. This is the main feature of our species that has really helped us survive and then thrive. It's what's called penta. So bands of 3 to 5 people come together and we get locked together in these groups. And if not all 3 to 5 people are mix of 3 to 5 people are created equally. So there's some people who will feel comfortable in groups, some people who will be natural leaders of groups, some people who will feel very uncomfortable in groups, feel invisible and unseen. They could be an incredibly powerful and charismatic, magnetic person, confident person. When they're locked into the group aura, doesn't work for them at all. So we can use it to engineer groups, and mostly though it's about troubleshooting. It's like at the family level, I'm doing a reading this Friday with a mom of 5 who's an incredibly powerful human being. I can already tell. I haven't really met her, but just looking at her design and hearing a bit of her story, she's completely miserable, and she's shocked that she's miserable as a mom. She has none of the activations that would suggest that she would enjoy having a little pack of kids, and being in that group aura. She's not built for it, so there has to be strategies to take care of herself. And also then again, she can just relax, stop comparing herself to other moms. So there's a small group, and that also can be applied to business. So if there's a small team of people working together in an organization or a business, we can look and see where are the strengths of that group, who's thriving, who's not, where are the gaps. You get 5 people together, it doesn't mean it's going to have everything it needs. Some of that is just obvious, but the human design blueprinting shows where those gaps are, so it can accelerate that process.
One question that I've been hanging on to that I want to come back to a little bit outside of the thread is 88. So in Eastern Western astrology, right? It's time of birth. Why does your chart matter at time of birth? Well, I don't know. That sounds intuitively right. I guess if we're going to base reading on an event, it would be birth. What is, and so this uses that, and it also uses where the planets are 88 days prior to birth, right? So why 88?
Yeah. I don't know. I've never gotten that answer. I don't think that answer exists. I mean, what I can tell you is that it correlates with, so I'll show you this one. So this is your chart. It's those 4 main archetypes. Can you see the cross kind of formation?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I don't know why I'm showing it to you actually, but it correlates with the moment that the soul, or the personality crystal, it's called in human design, enters the body.
Okay.
So the body's being built inside the womb by what's called the design crystal. And that's that unconscious side. But then that, for whatever, I mean, this is just supposedly the way it works, but the soul enters the body, and in that moment, whatever the geometry of the universe is, it gets locked in as the imprinting of the body and the unconscious.
Sure. Yeah. The theory is, it's just interesting. I'm sure you get that question a lot. Why 88? And, but as I hear, it's like so it's, when the soul is crystallized in the body in the womb is about around 88 days prior to birth.
Yeah. And it's not 90 days. It's not 90 degrees, 90 days, because then everything would be static. So it's like slightly off. And I'll just show you this one other image that I find really powerful. So I was mentioning how humanity is, we're all part of this larger organism. Babies are being born all the time. And so babies are, all these waves of human beings, they're getting imprinted. We have in humanity, the human beings that are alive today, we have a little bit of everything, right? We have a little bit of everything about the universe, and human beings are carrying that. We're probably going too deep into the weeds here, but I wanted to show you this double helix because each one of us, like, information is being passed, like the program is evolving through our species, every generation that comes in. But even like you and I, who were born in the same generation, I think you're 80 and I'm 81. We all play different roles. And by being ourselves and playing our role, we are evolving our species. And information is always being passed. Like, we're this filter for information, and we're also creating experience, and then we're passing it on. And while we're being imprinted, at the same time, we're also impacting the universe on some level as well, and impacting each other. But I was just going to pass this on. Like, you're a 3-5. So the combination of a 3-5, and Seth, for instance, our friend, is a 4-1, and I'm a 5-1. So the way we operate, like, your role is to discover through experience. You're here to go try things out. And to learn through trial and error, and then you pass that information on to 3-6s, you pass that information on to 4-6s, you pass that information on to 4-1s, 5-1s, like that. And you can start to see from human design profiling, like, why certain types of people show up in your life, and your relationship to the totality, the role that you play for the totality.
So it's your design, but your design is specifically designed to carry out a broader evolution. So I have my role in the evolution of humanity, maybe even broader than that, is in the evolution of the totality or the universe. That's actually a question. So before I guess it, is there a grand philosophy beyond what you just shared? Like, is there a destiny? Is there a destiny?
Yeah, there's a cosmology. So the voice did tell Ra about all kinds of things from the past as well as the future, and some of it he pieced together. Because it's all mathematics. It's all. But anyway, we're getting into territory that's not my expertise. But there is a cosmology, and there's stories about where we're headed and what's going to happen. There's stories about where we came from. And it all is this evolutionary process. And one of the things that sticks with me that I can share is that that we are like a baby that's preparing to be born. So that, like, the universe is expanding and it's developing. It's developing, and it's being nurtured, and it will be born. Like, something will be born. And we're part of that process. And yeah, so we're, like, so important. At the same time, we're just these little specks, we're just like these little these little single-celled organisms flying in space, part of something that's so much bigger than us.
Coming back to out of the cosmology, which I love that, and then because it provides a greater context, so someone might come to you just for themselves, but also, I mean, I would like to. It helps me to know if I'm part of something greater than just myself. And your website is Human Design Coaching. It's coachwithlucas.com. So coaching, zeroing in on that is, I guess, a hint for me. So you coach your clients. So it's not just a human design reading. It's also, you also do some coaching with that. Is that right?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes people I've done readings for will invite me to coach them as they're integrating the material. I picked that URL when I was transitioning out of the work I was doing in those companies, training other health coaches and doing business coaching. And so I thought I was going to be doing a lot of coaching. Turns out I'm doing just a lot of readings. So I'll do individual readings, couples readings. I'll do readings for families and organizations. And then there are times people want to keep me on for a little while and support them, but mainly it's just teaching people what these maps show about them.
Gotcha.
And then it's about experimenting. It's and obviously coaches, we can be so helpful as a sounding board and asking great questions, helping people reflect and get clear about what their truth is. But human design, it really is about here you have an inner authority. And there's different types. So like your inner authority is your gut response to life. Your gut response to life. Something is happening in life and your gut is going to say yes or no. But for you specifically, you can't trust that in the moment. It's an important data point, but you need to sleep on things. You need to, because you're emotionally defined, and emotionality always clouds everything. So you take these gut data points. Doesn't matter at all what your mind thinks or says about something. Your gut knows, but you really need to watch your gut response over time. So that's just an example. That's your inner authority. That's your inner authority. If you resonate with this, don't believe it. It's not a new religion. Don't believe it. But if you resonate with it, go experiment with it.
Yeah.
So I like to just introduce people to it, give them a really thorough reading, and send them on their way to relax into themselves and to follow their inner authority.
How can people get in touch with you and learn more about you?
Yeah. So Coach with Lucas, I have on my scheduling page, there's an introductory video. So you can watch that. If you've made it this far in this interview, you've gotten a good sense of my energy and who I am, but you can check that out and learn more about what I offer. And then if you're interested, you can contact me if you have questions or just sign up for a reading. And then I just wanted to point everybody for people who, again, I'm not the best person to learn about human design from. I'm a great person to learn about your human design. But if you want to learn about the cosmology and the whole, where it comes from and all of that, you can go to a website called jovianarchive.com. I'm not affiliated with them at all. It's just the best for source material on this particular system.
Cool. I'll link that in the description. And if they want to reach you, they just go to coachwithlucas.com.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah. Thank you. Really appreciate your time. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Take good care.